So who noticed my mistake at the beginning of the service? There is that, and I have to tell you what really attracted me to this shirt is the idea that it looks sort of like my garage, or somebody's garage floor. You know, the little flex that they throw down and all that kind of stuff. I'm blue collar for the most part, so when I saw it, I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. Although I will share that it did end up with some significance in today's talk. Did anybody notice what I skipped at the beginning? Did anybody notice? What did I skip? I skipped the mission statement. I skipped our vision. I skipped our VHAN. This is the question that I have for you. How come no one said it? I understand that. This is part, as I sat there in horror doing meditation. How can I possibly spin this one so it doesn't look so bad? But the spiritual lesson did come to me. And it came in the form of look at the silence that happens when something is amiss. What's going on? Look at the silence. We all participated in it to some degree or another. It's time for us to grow up and to let go of that notion that somehow we're going to embarrass somebody by saying, wait a minute, you have forgotten something. Or perhaps you are missing this. As I will show today in today's talk, which is entitled, Anthony Ray Hinton. We all have a little bit more of a responsibility than perhaps we're even really aware of. Okay? As you can see, that the Anthony Ray Hinton is a phonetic spelling of integration, isn't it? Right? And what is it that we think of when we think of integrity? Well, we heard Andrew MacArthur give us a wonderful, a good definition, working definition of it last week, which is the idea of wholeness, oneness, and also the idea of strength, that has something to do with integrity. We gain our strength here in the science of mind by operating on these principles that we come from oneness, just that we are, like Robert was talking about, that we are all connected. And as a result of this connection, we are able to choose to create how we would like our experience to unfold in life. Is that true?
Yes.
Is that equally true for everyone?
Yes.
Really? I'd like to introduce you to this man. Excellent. This gentleman's name is Anthony Ray Hinton. And the book that I will be discussing today is The Sun Does Shine. It is his autobiography, and self-written. I believe he did have some help, and it is also forwarded by Brian Stevenson, who was his lawyer. See, our friend Anthony Ray, and I want to say thank you to Lori Stevens, by the way, who has graciously assisted me over the past year or so in searching out what I believe to be, searching out answers for what I believe to be a hole within me. Okay? And this book was part of that self-discovery. You see, our friend Anthony Ray Hinton, in 1985, was convicted of crime, murder, that he did not commit. It was also tagged to him that he was, the two other murders that were of similar nature were tacked on to his sentence. The police, this was down in Alabama, okay, the police ignored evidence. The police ignored basically telling Anthony Ray that, we know that you're not guilty, but we're going to put you away. What is it that we notice about Anthony Ray? Say it again, please. He's black. He is African American. Now, we are taught an awful lot of times that we are not supposed to see color, correct? That we're supposed to look past that we are supposed to be able to look toward the essence of someone within. And friends, I understand what we're talking about with that. I get it. We have to be extremely careful that this is not a form of spiritual bypass, but what we are doing is not recognizing what someone else's societal limitations may very well be. You see, Anthony Ray Hinton had a stacked debt against him because he was black. Okay? He also was in an economic class that ensured that there was no way that he was going to get adequate representation for such a thing as a capital crime like murder. As a matter of fact, back in 1985, the dollar amount that was afforded to Anthony Ray was $1,500. That was what the state paid his public defender, and out of those funds, he was to provide his own defense. Okay? What he was able to provide was this. His lawyer was able to provide a person who was blind who was doing the ballistics. Okay? So he did not have, the person who was doing the ballistics literally could not discern what was going on under the microscope in looking at the evidence. The judge ignored this. The public defender, guess what, actually turned out to be friends with the prosecutor. Can anyone see conflict of interest? In some sad, insane type of Franz Kafka-esque trial. Has everybody read the trial? Anybody read this? It's completely absurd. And that is what this is. The facts of the matter were this. He was nowhere near the crime. He was at work. He was put into a position and his life was ruined, absolutely destroyed by the implicit and unconscious bias of a bunch of white people. Now, I don't know about you, man, but that makes me extremely uncomfortable being a white person. That makes me very uncomfortable. So much so that it tugs at my heart, hence the inner tug when I'm talking about the phonetic spelling. Ray, shine, obviously has to do with him. Anthony Ray was convicted on 3 counts of capital homicide with virtually no evidence and was sentenced to death row in Alabama. Aside from utter disbelief, he simply could not believe what it was that had come to pass and how this had happened to him, and that he lived in this, because he had always known that there was a different set of standards for black people versus white people. He had always known this, but he couldn't believe that he was actually in the system, that this had happened to him. Yet here he was on death row in Alabama, and I'd like to paint a picture of death row so that you can understand a little bit of what this might look like. Let's imagine an extremely long hallway, perhaps from here to the set of stairs that is back there. And on both sides, there are cells which are 5 feet by 7 feet wide. 5 feet by 7 feet, which these gentlemen and women were forced to spend 23 hours a day. Imagine that there's no ventilation, there's no light really to speak of other than just a little bit that's coming in through this hole up here, which you really can't see out of, but other people can see in because they are elevated out in the hall. You get out for 1 hour a day, during which time you may get a shower, which consists of, at this time, a hose. You may also get to get outside and get a little bit of fresh air for about 15 minutes. This is Alabama. In the summertime, it reaches temperature. Everybody been to the south? Anybody been to the south? What's it like there? Yeah. About as intolerable as it can. I can't stand it when it gets above 85 degrees around here. I can only imagine what it must be like to be in an area that is not ventilated, 120 degrees with 100% humidity. Down at the end of that hall, down there, is Big Mom, the electrician. Imagine what happens, and it happened 57 times that Anthony Ray Hinton was there, where an inmate took a long walk down that hall and was placed into a chair. And electricity was run through their body until they died. If that doesn't make your heart hurt, folks, I don't know what does. I don't know what could. Because as I sit there and think about it, all I can think about is how could we possibly be so cruel and callous? And yet we stand by and say nothing, just like we did at the beginning. Imagine the smell. Are you uncomfortable yet? Imagine that smell permeates this area that you cannot escape for 2 days. You cannot hold down food because you were too busy vomiting. Your eyes are watering from the afraid of being there. For God's sake, is this Old Testament or what? Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. We're going to get in there and we're going to treat these people just as badly, if not worse, than the crimes that they may have perpetrated. Which, interestingly enough to say, Anthony Ray Hinton is not the only person that is in here convicted innocent. It is estimated that there are 10% of between 2,500 to 3,000 people on death row in the United States. 10% of them are, guess what, folks? Innocent. They literally did not commit those crimes. And if you watch the news, although you may need to be able to, you're going to have to glean a little bit and dig just a little bit, because I've come to find that regular search engines do not show a lot of this information. There seems to be an exoneration nearly every 3 or 4 weeks of a black man who is let out after having served for an extreme amount of time. His incidence is not, it's not strange. It's not something that is uncommon. We'd like to think that, well, this took place in 1985. That is not the America we live in today. I would contend we're still there in bolts. And we are taught that we are not to judge by circumstances, that we are to look past those. And I respectfully, I understand that. We are supposed to come from the greatest and highest vision, but if that is all we ever do, is focus on that vision and do nothing and say nothing towards circumstances, how is it that we will ever get where we would like to be? I don't know. I'm not sure that that can happen. We need voices. We need objection. We need people to say, I do not appreciate the way this is unfolding. And it's come so far. This particular book has had such an impact. It was one of Oprah's Book of the Month reads. And it's had such an impact in California that Governor Gavin Newsom has, they're working at repealing the death penalty in California. Our death penalty system has been by any measure of failure. And this is a quote from him. It has discriminated against defendants who are mentally ill, black or brown, or can't afford expensive legal representation. It has provided no public safety benefit or value as a deterrent. It has wasted billions of taxpayer dollars. Billions. That's just in California. So here's my pitch for this. And perhaps it's time for us to move beyond this, right? If we want to be acting in integrity, we need to recognize that even those that are in these compromised positions, they are part of the one as well. And as I have said quite frequently, what is done to one is done to all. Period. That's, for me, the logical outcropping of oneness. What is done to one is done to all. So I want to focus a little bit on Anthony Ray and how Anthony Ray passed his time in this god-awful, forsaken terrible, terrible, terrible place. Guess what, folks? He shouldn't have been there. But he was there. So what was he going to do? Was he going to make the best of it? Well, for the first 3 years that he was there, he literally could not handle the anger and the anguish and the pain that he felt. It was so bad that he did not speak to anybody for 3 years. He did not speak to an inmate. He did not speak to a warden. He spoke to no one. Absolutely no one. Because he was so angry, and he was angry at the prosecutor, he was angry at the lawyer, he was angry at all these people. And he finally reached a point where I think we all get there, where we're just so fed up and we're so tired with the way that we are living, that we absolutely recognize that, oh my God, I have to choose to do something differently. And it came from him in the form of someone who was crying one night. Now imagine that you can hear everything that's going on there on death row. You have like a sense of this person's over here, this person's over here, because they would still talk, right? They would still talk through all of those cracks out there, all through the small bars that they had up there at the top of the room. And he heard a person crying. And it was inconsolable, because a lot of that stuff happened. It happened pretty regularly. But this time in specific, he was defeated and cracked open enough that he literally began to understand this other person's pain. This other person's pain cracked him open, right? And as a result of getting cracked open, he began to get what I would call a different level of respect for someone else's plight. Does everybody have a good working definition of respect? What does respect mean? Mary. Mary says to honor the divinity of yourself and someone else. Excellent definition. That's a very spiritual definition. I love it. I love it. It speaks to the idea that yes, we are on the inside all the same. The problem with this is that it ignores conditions. I got a definition of respect that I found this past week, or a couple weeks ago, that I found to be just ridiculous. So simple, because I sat there and I thought, I know what respect is, right? I'm a minister. I know what respect is. And as I read this definition, it became very clear to me, I don't have a clue as to what respect is. Let's break it into two parts. You have re, and you have spect. Re, meaning again. Again. Spect, meaning to look. To look again from the point of view of the other. To put oneself in the other's shoes and then respond. One of those definitions requires something more, a little bit more. It requires that we become open to really feeling what it is that someone else is experiencing. We've all heard the phrase "walk a mile" in someone's shoes, right? Right? There's a difference between walking a mile in somebody's shoes and living in their shoes, and we tend to forget that. I tend to forget that. Because at the end of the day, I can take those shoes off, and I can go back to the set of privileges that I have, that our friend Anthony Ray Hinton, and many people today still do not, particularly in groups of color. Prime example was a verdict that was handed down a couple of weeks ago. Does anyone here know who Stephen Clark is? Stephen Clark, 22-year-old man in Sacramento, who was shot in his grandmother's own backyard, shot by police, okay, for what looking like he must have had a gun, when in fact he had a cell phone. Last week, a couple weeks ago, the verdict came down. Those policemen, white, not guilty, no charges, nothing. Nothing. How did they get there? Is that because they're in a position of privilege? Is that because they're law enforcement? I mean, these are the tough questions that we need to begin asking if we're really in this position going about a world that works for everyone. Because I would contend, friends, that the reason that we believe the law works for us is because it does, but that may not mean that it works the same for everyone else. That becomes the measure of where we are to set foot in to make sure and ensure that there is equity for others involved, where there may not be equity. And equity is a little bit different than equality, right? It means that not all people are going to get the, quote, same treatment. It means that some people are going to get different treatment based upon the circumstances that have come from their lives. So Anthony Ray Hinton was in this, he was in that night when he heard this crime, right? This is what happened for him. It was silent for a few moments, and then the most amazing thing happened. On a dark night in what must surely be the most desolate and dehumanizing place on earth, a man laughed. A real laugh. And with that laughter, I realized that the state of Alabama could steal my future and my freedom, but they couldn't steal my soul or my humanity. And they most certainly couldn't steal my sense of humor. I missed my family. I missed my mom. But sometimes you have to make family where you find family, or you die in isolation. I wasn't ready to die. I wasn't going to make it that easy on them. I was going to find another way to do my time, whatever time I had left. Everything, I realized, is a choice. And spending your days waiting to die, there's no way to live. So in that nadir, in that chasm, he made that choice. He was able to make that choice under circumstances that were just unthinkable. I don't know how I would respond. I would like to think that I'd be able to do that, but I don't know that, folks, because when it boils right down to it, I've been pretty pampered my entire life. Pretty pampered. I've experienced nothing like, when I put myself in the shoes of other people of color. I don't have a clue. And that's when I recognized that I had this massive hole in my education. A massive hole in my education as a human. How am I to get that education? Part of it actually ends up, it actually ended up coming through me and coming through this book. You see, Anthony Ray ended up having a cellmate, someone who was just a couple cells down from him, who was a gentleman named Henry Hayes. Henry Hayes was the part of the group that was convicted of lynching the last black man in America in 1981. And he and Ray got to be soulmates, basically. They're right next to each other. They're busy, they end up exonerating. I'm not even going to say exonerating. That's the wrong word. They end up experiencing a deep sense of racial healing as a result of conversation that was risky, conversation that was hard, conversation that was painful. It didn't happen because nobody was willing to look vulnerable and to say something that might be uncomfortable, that might be difficult. They said those difficult things. You know why? Where the hell else are they going to go? What else are they going to do? I propose a lot of times for this idea that I really only want to address these things when I'm cornered. Right? Do you identify with that? Yeah. So something happened for Ray. Something happened for Henry, which was they were both able to see that they had been in a system that had put these mistruths within their framework, a faulty set of beliefs that they'd been operating on their entire lives. They became the best of friends. And as a result of this, our friend Ray was able to begin the process of forgiveness. He was able to begin the process of forgiveness of these people who had wronged him so greatly and really get over the hump. He did some amazing things on death row. For God's sake, he started a book club. Really? We started a book club, and the first book that he had out, they'd meet once a month. And the first book that they ended up reading, they read James Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain. My friends, if you have not read James Baldwin, go buy a copy. I want to talk about someone that can give you an education on what it means to be black. This man. So I started a book club. He ended up doing, I promised you a little bit about his imagination. Part of the way that he ended up escaping through that business there was the power of imagination. There was a period there where what he did was he would focus on going to tea with the Queen of England, right? He'd be able to check out for days and days at a time in meditation. So, under these extreme circumstances, and by the way, he was married not only to Halle Berry, he was married to Sandra Bullock as well. So I can imagine all the coping mechanisms, and they brought out a side of him that he was not, that was amazing. It shows the capability of the human mind and divinity shining through even in times that are incredibly dark. The problem is that he should have never had to do that. That's the problem. Okay. So he spent 30 years on death row and was finally exonerated in 2015, folks. 2015, after spending 30 years of his life on death row. Would you like to know what happened? Maybe you don't. Anybody want to know? Yeah. The DA of the area where he was at, the judge where he was, of the municipality down there in Birmingham, Alabama, where he was at, did not even issue a public apology. Nothing. They gave this man nothing for 30 years of his life. Why is that? Because we're so busy that we just can't admit that we're wrong. We can't admit that as a culture, we have systematically perpetrated something against a group of people for so long, and we still don't want to face the facts. Maybe this makes you uncomfortable. Good. Because I find it very uncomfortable. And uncomfortable enough, you're going to begin to see some things that are going to change. You're going to see some actual results. Because I don't think that I'm the only person that really rejects this hard to this. Let's have a prayer. I know that the power and the presence of God is here right now in this moment. It's in every thought, every feeling. All of it is a divine experience. Even that which seems to be uncomfortable, even that which seems to be difficult, even that which seems to be the ugliness and maybe something that is within me that is surfacing that I really detest. I know that that is divine discontent. I know that this is God working, because a lot of times the way that I see things work in the world is that there is a cycle of destruction, creation, and protection. And that as this all comes to fruition, it is all roiling, it is all coming to pass right now in this moment, that healing is occurring. We must look at the condition and look at the condition and reject it, transcend and include it, knowing that we choose something different. I know that this sense of respect that has been developing, that continues to grow and change and expand, is a sense of divine calling and order. I'm grateful for this knowing, for this sense that we are becoming more integrated as we choose to look at that which we do not wish to look at. I know that all is well. And that by looking at it, it begins to lose its power. It is no longer a subconscious thought, it is a conscious thought. And I can choose to see it differently. And I affirm that in this moment, each and every one of us chooses. We all choose. I'm grateful for this truth. And I release it knowing that it is so. And so